At the restaurant, my son-in-law pulled my daughter's hair in front of everyone. His father cheered. That's how it's done. She needs to learn her place. My daughter wept, shaking with pure rage. I stood up and did something they will never forget. It was exactly 8:17 p.m. on a Tuesday in mid-October when the illusion of my daughter's marriage finally shattered, not with a whimper, but with the sickening sound of hair being yanked from a scalp and the booming, celebratory laughter of a man who believed he owned the world. We were seated at table 14 in the center of Le Jardin, a French bistro in the Upper District where the tasting menu cost $350 per person, and the waitstaff moved with the silent, terrified efficiency of servants in a feudal court. My daughter, Maya, sat to my left, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth as if she were trying to disappear into the weave of the fabric. Opposite us sat Gavin, her husband of 4 years, a man whose tailored suit, a charcoal wool blend that retailed for $2,000 but never quite fit his sloping shoulders, could not conceal the soft, indulgent bloat of his face. Next to him was his father, Richard, a man who wore his arrogance like a second skin, smelling of expensive scotch and old, unexamined misogyny. The dinner was ostensibly to celebrate Gavin's promotion to senior vice president at the logistics firm Richard owned, a title that came with a salary of $180,000 a year, but no actual responsibilities, a fact I knew because I had hired a private investigator named Reynolds to audit their company 3 months prior. I had not told Maya about the audit. I had not told her that I knew the firm was hemorrhaging cash, or that Gavin's business trips to Miami were actually weekends spent gambling at the Hard Rock Casino with borrowed money. I had kept my silence because Maya was not ready to hear it. She was still in the phase of denial, the phase where she believed that if she just cooked better, dressed quieter, and smiled softer, the monster in her bed would turn back into the prince she thought she married. But tonight, the monster was hungry. Gavin had been drinking since the appetizers arrived, consuming 3 glasses of a 2018 Pinot Noir in rapid succession, his face flushing a mottled red. He was recounting a story about a secretary he had fired for crying in the break room, framing it as a triumph of management strategy. Richard was nodding, chuckling at the appropriate intervals, egging him on. You have to be firm, Richard said, slicing into his filet mignon with aggressive strokes. Women respect firmness, Gavin. It's biology. Maya shifted in her seat, reaching for her water glass. Her hand trembled, just a fraction of a millimeter. But I saw it. I saw everything. I saw the way she had applied extra concealer under her left eye, a shade that didn't quite match her natural skin tone. I saw the way she flinched when Gavin moved his hand to grab the salt shaker. I saw the ghost of the girl she used to be, the brilliant architect who had graduated summa cum laude, who used to laugh with her whole body fading into the background of this terrifying domestic tableau. I'm not sure that's entirely fair, Maya said softly, her voice barely rising above the clatter of silverware. Maybe she was just having a bad day. The table went silent. Gavin stopped chewing. He turned his head slowly to look at her, his eyes dead and flat, like a shark sensing movement in the water. Excuse me, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous, quiet register that usually preceded a storm. Maya shrank back. I just meant everyone is human, Gavin. She didn't mean to upset you. Gavin laughed, a harsh, barking sound that caused heads at the nearby tables to turn. Oh, she didn't mean to upset me? You hear that, Dad? Maya thinks emotions are a valid excuse for incompetence. Richard wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, smirking. Well, Maya has always been a bit soft, hasn't she? That's why she needs guidance. Gavin turned back to Maya, his expression hardening. You know what your problem is, Maya? You don't know when to shut your mouth. You think because my mother pays for your little art classes that you have an opinion on how I run my business? I felt a cold, metallic rage spreading through my chest, starting in my stomach and radiating out to my fingertips. I gripped the stem of my wine glass, calculating the force required to shatter it. I was not just a mother-in-law. I was Eleanor Vance, a woman who had built a commercial real estate empire from the ground up after my own husband died, leaving me with nothing but debt. I had negotiated with union leaders, corrupt city councilmen, and hostile board members. I had destroyed men far more powerful than Gavin and Richard, simply by outworking and outthinking them. But to them, I was just Grandma Ellie, the widow with the nice portfolio who was good for a loan now and then. They had no idea that the loan I had given them for their down payment was structured as a callable note, or that I owned the building their office was in through a shell company. They thought I was a resource. They were about to find out I was a reckoning. Gavin reached out, his hand moving with a speed that spoke of practice, and grabbed a handful of Maya's hair at the back of her head. He yanked her head back hard. Her neck snapped backward, exposing her throat, and she let out a sharp, involuntary gasp of pain. Her eyes filled with instant tears, terrified and humiliated. Look at me when I'm talking to you, Gavin hissed, twisting his fist to keep her trapped. You are embarrassed me. You are embarrassing this family. Learn your place. It was a scene of such casual public violence that time seemed to suspend. The restaurant, which had been buzzing with low conversation, went deathly silent. A waiter dropped a fork, and then Richard cheered. He actually clapped his hands together and laughed. That's how it's done, he boomed, raising his glass. She needs to learn her place, son. Discipline. Maya wept, silent, shaking sobs that racked her thin frame, her hands gripping the edge of the table, too afraid to reach up and try to pry pry his fingers loose. That was the moment. The switch in my brain flipped from observation to execution. The somber reflection on my daughter's tragic marriage evaporated, replaced by the steely, diamond-hard determination of a predator who has decided to feed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry out. I stood up. The movement was smooth, controlled, the result of years of Pilates and a lifetime of carrying heavy burdens. I picked up my steak knife, a heavy, serrated utensil with a black wooden handle. I didn't lunge. I simply walked around the table to where Gavin sat, his hand still twisted in my daughter's hair, his face twisted in a sneer of triumph. He didn't even look at me until I was standing directly over him. "What are you doing, Eleanor?" "Sit." He never finished the sentence. I brought the heavy brass pommel of the steak knife down onto the metacarpal bones of his hand, the one holding Maya's hair, with a precise, shattering force. There was a sickening crunch, the sound of small bones giving way under pressure. Gavin screamed, a high-pitched, guttural shriek of pure agony, and his hand instantly sprang open, releasing Maya. He scrambled back, clutching his crushed hand to his chest, his face draining of color, his eyes bulging. "You crazy bitch! You broke my hand!" Richard stood up, his face purple with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing? I'll have you arrested!" I turned to Richard. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke in a tone so cold it could have frozen the water in the glasses. "Sit down, Richard, or I will recite the flight logs from your private trip to Epstein's Island in 2009 to the entire room." Richard froze. His mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. He sank back into his chair, the blood draining from his face so fast I thought he might faint. The reference was a bluff mostly, but I knew he had been in circles that made him nervous, and the specificity of the year was a calculated guess based on Reynolds' reports of his consulting years. It worked. Fear is a powerful silencer. I turned back to Gavin, who was whimpering, curled in a ball on the banquette. I leaned in close, so only he and Maya could hear. "You touched her," I whispered. "You put your hands on my daughter. That was your one mistake. You thought she was alone. You thought she was weak, but she is not alone. She is mine, and I am going to peel the skin off your life so slowly, you will beg me to stop." I straightened up and looked at the stunned diners, at the frozen waiters, at the maitre d', who was frantically whispering into a phone. I pulled a Platinum American Express card from my purse and tossed it onto the table, right into the pool of gravy from Richard's steak. "That is for the damage to the hand," I announced clearly, my voice carrying to the back of the room, "and for the discomfort caused to the other guests. Keep the change." I reached down and took Maya's hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "Stand up, Maya," I said gently. "We're leaving." She looked at me, dazed, her eyes wide with shock. "Mom," she whispered. "Get up," I repeated, my voice firm but kind. "You are done here. You are done with him." She stood, shaky but upright. I grabbed her coat from the back of the chair and draped it over her shoulders. I guided her away from the table, stepping over Gavin's extended leg without looking down. As we walked toward the exit, the silence of the room held. No one moved to stop us. No one said a word. The shock of the violence, combined with the absolute authority of my exit, had paralyzed them. We walked out into the cool October night, the valet already bringing my car around because I had texted him the moment I stood up. I helped Maya into the passenger seat of my Audi A8, buckling her in like she was a child again. I walked around to the driver's side, slid in, and locked the doors. Only then did I let out a breath. My hands were steady on the wheel. I looked at the entrance of the restaurant. Gavin hadn't come out. Richard hadn't come out. They were likely waiting for the police or an ambulance. Let them wait. I put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb, merging into the flow of traffic. Maya was crying softly now, the shock wearing off, replaced by the crushing reality of what had just happened. "Mom," she sobbed. "He's going to kill me. He's going to be so mad. You don't understand. He knows people. His dad knows judges." I reached over and took her hand, squeezing it tight. "He isn't going to do anything, Maya," I said, my voice calm, rhythmic, reassuring, "because by the time he gets out of the hospital, he isn't going to have a house to go back to, or a job, or a bank account." Maya looked at me, confusion warring with her fear. "What do you mean?" I turned onto the highway, heading not toward her house, but toward my estate in the hills, the fortress I had built for exactly this kind of contingency. I said that I have been preparing for this night for 6 months. I didn't just break his hand, sweetheart. I broke his future. Tonight was just the opening statement. The trial hasn't even begun. The drive to my estate took 40 minutes. The silence in the car was heavy, filled only by the rhythmic thrum of the tires on the asphalt.